So, welcome everyone to, which episode are we up to now? All right, so this is the 6th Global Passive House Happy Hour of our 2nd year and episode number 58. Thanks for joining us. I'm Prudence Ferreira. I'm a senior member of the Carbon Neutral Design Group at BR Plus A Consulting Engineers, and I lead their Passive House team. And whether you're here for the 58th time or the first time, you are absolutely in the right place for a Wednesday day, evening, whatever time it is where you are. We're here to share ideas, learn from each other's mistakes, create inspiration and collaboration, and do the good work that needs to be done, and there's plenty of it. So tonight I'd like to open the show by telling you about an opportunity to use your building science knowledge and win $200,000 to bring your innovative ideas to life. It's a competition you may have heard Devin Basher talking about. It's called Envelope Retrofit Opportunities for Building Optimization Technologies, or E-ROBOT is the acronym for short. And an individual or a group of individuals competing as one team can participate, or private entities, academic institutions, and folks can be from all over the place, even though it's an American competition, so long as the person who is registered as the team lead is a citizen of the US or a permanent resident. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And the way it works is that competitors can focus on one of the following components, or all of them, or two of them. There's three of them: sensing and inspection, mapping, and retrofit tools. That's pretty broad. So the way that it works is that the submissions for the first round have to describe your plans for integrating your products into comprehensive service offerings through partnering or other commercialization plans. And the deadline is coming up. It's May 12th, but the submission is only a 10-page technical and design specification brief with a 90-second to 2-minute video that will be made public. And there are going to be 10 groups or individuals or institutions, whatever the teams are comprised of, that will each win $200,000 in that first round. And then in phase 2, the winning competitors from phase 1 will actually take their individual components and add the other required functionality to create a holistic turnkey product offering. So collaboration between competitors is encouraged, which means if we have multiple people from the accelerator competing, each of us kind of having a piece of the puzzle, and putting it together, that is encouraged. And up to 4 teams will split $2 million in prize money for the phase 2. So I'd like you to unmute yourselves now that I've told you about this, and join me in a toast to collaboration, innovation, and acceleration.
Cheers, everybody.
To collaborate.
Cheers.
All right. So, you guys ready? If you're interested in getting involved, reach out to Devin Basher in the chat, who is competing and maybe looking for more colleagues to partner with. He's got so many great ideas. And me and Trevor are going to enter the Lorax. So let's start making this vision that we have as a community of vertical integration for retrofits happen for real. This is an opportunity to make that happen. I'm going to paste a link to the official rules and the website into the chat so you guys can check it out. And yeah, I hope that folks want to step up and get involved. So we've got another great show coming up for you. Our guest this episode is Zeina Talje, who's going to share her experience with us from the business end of being a passive house condo developer in Boston. But first, over to Zach.
Yes, you're going to say, where's Zach? Well, I'm playing the role of Zach tonight. He's taken a couple of days off, and hopefully you've checked out the new website that he and Sydney have been working hard at. So check out the new Passive House Accelerator website. And now we're going to go into breakout rooms, and I'm going to hit the magical button for the first time, and off we go. All right, I think everyone is back. Oh, and I think everyone can see my screen. Do I get a, Mark, do I get a high five or a thumbs up? Can you see my screen?
Thumbs up, Sean.
Does it show the new and updated Passive House Accelerator website?
It is fabulous, brother.
All right, so I'm now going to show us the week review. And if you want to follow me, please do so. You can go to Explore. You're going to hit on articles. And if you've got good internet speed, it should pop up quickly. You're going to hit Passive House Week in Preview. And we've already done the amazing summit that occurred on Monday. If you missed it, it should be in the Passive House Accelerator YouTube page in a few days. We had a great evening talking with Alex and his team at Monadnock Construction. They are a powerhouse in passive house construction. Amazing of the schedule and the details. They knew that I was going to be ready here at 4:13 with this slide deck because they've got things down to the seconds. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll get Zeina in a second. Check out the Passive House podcast with Robin Wark from BC Hydro that got published this week. Got some interesting events coming up, so save the dates for next week's Building Energy Boston, and then we have the NEPHN's event on June 10th and 11th. So make sure those in your calendar. Lots of other events going on, but again, Friday you can listen to Mark and Dave with BS Fridays. We're going to have Vagan Timbers on the show, so if you like mass timber, check that out. And again, you got a list of all the different education opportunities. So that is the weekend preview, and I will pass over back to Prudence.
Let me unmute myself. Okay, so our special guest tonight, as I mentioned in the opening, is Zeina Talje, and she has had quite a bit of experience working in the real estate industry, 20 years in fact. And she recently founded her own shop back in 2017 called Z Capital Investments, with a focus on repositioning of mixed use urban properties and developing them. And she's got some really great business skills. She has a degree in architecture and an MBA from Columbia. So a really great combination. She's also a passive house consultant and a lead AP and a licensed general contractor and a licensed real estate salesperson. So she's got like all sides of the picture, all facets of what it takes to bring a passive house from design all the way to fruition, and how to sell it, how to put the capital stack together, how to analyze what's going to work. And she's going to share that experience with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Zeina.
Thanks so much for having me again, Prue and Sean. What a great group of people to be with. Prue mentioned to you that I'm on the business side here. So it's really amazing to be around so many folks who really come from the engineering technical industry side. I do take pride in thinking of myself as someone who's competent in that space, but I love business. I love buildings. I love figuring out a market. And this has been a great space for innovation to bring passive house and figure out how does it really translate to real tangible, reality on the ground. And I think that's everybody's objective here. So I'll walk you today through 52 Fisher Ave, which is a project in Boston that I just finished. We actually finished the building in December, and we actually just completed marketing and construction. So this is hot off the press, and you can see it here. It's 6 units of condos, and it's pending passive house low energy certification. It's almost net zero, and I'll share with you more about that. But to give you some background, Prue alluded, I've been in real estate for about 2 decades, primarily focused on development of large scale commercial projects. Always had an interest on energy performance and just metrics, because ultimately energy means savings, means more money in people's pockets. And it's just a trend that's been, people have talked about for decades. So nothing new here. And it continues to evolve. I thought when I did the FIAS training that it was fantastic. It was a great framework. It was so much better than my education as an architect. And I went to, I think, pretty darn good school. And I really was hooked. Of course, I never can pull off a project without a great team. And it's really folks like you who are committed, who are always trying to advance their practice to the highest standard and willing to put in the time, the thought, the hours, and the frustrations to pull off projects. But with buildings, though, I have to say, you're nothing without a good construction crew. And I hit the jackpot with this team. The gentleman in the middle, Manny Reynoso, was just a stand-up, someone who could write the best management book. Construction sites aren't labs. They're places that are very, very difficult to screw things up. And this team was really by my side, always looking for a solution, willing to work, bringing everybody to the table to solve a problem. And they were the first, when we got shut down during COVID last April, they were on the roof tightening the building so that we wouldn't get any water damage. And then they were the first back in to restart as soon as that order was lifted. And again, why Passive House today? Well, I guess, as you all know, it's policy. It's you can't run away from it. Sometimes I wonder what other folks in business are doing. There's constant activity, there's action from a lot of activists, and you really just have to engage with it. I think that's how you stay relevant. And it's exciting to me, as someone who lives in Boston, to see how Mayor Walsh's visioning of carbon neutrality for Boston, some tactile metrics, really brought the conversation in my mind more to the center, and helped me as a business owner kind of say, hey, how can I craft a business around some of these shared values? You all know everything about performance, and I'm not going to go there, but the image here on the slide shows you sort of the pitch that we would use when we would talk to folks about what is Passive House. So love to share with you a little bit about what made this development at 52 Fisher Ave. What are some of the parameters and goals? This site is located in an area called Mission Hill, which is about 10 minutes from downtown Boston. It's in a community that is sort of always been considered a rental market for students. So that's not great for them, but it's a beautiful area with trees and hills, and quite diverse in its nature. It's also really close to the heart of the medical industry in Boston, Longwood Medical Center. And this location in particular was a site that a lot of people actually didn't want to develop. So when I met with the community and we were talking about the viability of a project, I had initially wanted to develop rental housing. And they came back and said, we're tired, we're fed up. We want people who are going to live here and they're going to come and work in our schools and be part of the fabric of this community. And I really was very much, I couldn't believe, their vision was so clear. And so I went back and tried to work the numbers and figure out, can we do this, talk to the banks and investors, and we were able to pull it off. And this is sort of where the work of approaching things with this eye towards solving a problem that's real, whether it's energy or what type of housing, that's always been at the heart of sort of what drives my approach to business and is the problem solving. So we needed to find a buyer that would live in Mission Hill. And we have said it's going to be first-time home buyers, most likely. And we're going to have to keep the price point relatively low. Boston is one of the top 3 most expensive housing markets in the country. And it really hurts a lot of people. And it's priced out actually a majority of people. When you're that expensive, so there's a lot to do here. And then we also want it to be a destination. So in my mind, you have to be the best product and you have to offer great everything. So I thought, if it's going to be first-time home buyers who are aware, who care about, their values sort of are the millennial values that have shifted from my generation, where there's a lot more greater focus on sustainability. And that was the plan. And the plan was to finish it in 18 months. Nothing crushes a project's returns like delays. So the site itself couldn't have been more challenging in terms of its topography. It was really more conducive to creating like a community bunny ski slope. There was about a 60-foot drop from the front to the back. It fronted 2 streets. You can see here what kind of elevations we're talking about. We used hybrid construction. We did a concrete foundation, steel deck for the garage, and stick on top. Terrible for a passive house project. I mean, the thermal bridging, we just, it was just amazing how complicated the small building was. But we went through it, and I had a personal objective of trying to solve for solar. And this was because of something I'd experienced over the last 20 years in dealing with sustainability. So ultimately, you all know what the energy savings are for passive house, but pulling off a project, just like everybody knows, is always so difficult. So you might as well make it passive house, is my pitch today. The other thing about sort of this approach of thinking about balance and hoping and aiming for net zero, you start to also think about density. And it really just started to flow, where 6-unit development most likely was going to be very close to net zero. That's why I call it almost net zero. And it really was harmonious with the urban fabric in the area. This is just another view of the site upon completion. So I just want to take a deep dive for a few moments here on a subject of buyer and price point, because with passive house, again, we're always looking, everybody I'm sure is asking about premiums. I decided to just focus on what can I get that serves, how can I sell this effectively, fast, get into a market space where there isn't a ton of competition, make it a destination. And we knew this was going to be first-time home buyers. They've been priced out, and this is pre-pandemic. They love the city, the whole work, live, play that all developers use. It's the site is a 22-minute walk to Longwood Medical. It's a 3-minute drive, 10-minute bike ride. We're going to get those doctors in there. The student population, the career grad students are going to come and live here, and this is going to be a great project. So this was pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic hits and everything changes. I mean, now it's a flight out of the city. Nobody wants to live in the city. Everybody's working remotely. Why do you even need to be a 10-minute walk from your office or downtown? First-time home buyers, well, you know what? The suburbs are on fire and they all want to buy there. So there was definitely that moment of pause of like, what did I get myself into? But then again, I have to say, in these moments of like thinking about what's next, I was like, well, at least this is a great building, So again, I mean, falling back on this idea of doing the best work you can and trying to achieve the highest standard, it really does get you through those moments of total uncertainty. And as we emerged from the pandemic, frankly, more the election, I would say, played a greater role. Things started to look far more positive. But during that time was when I really dove deep into how are we going to talk about this? All of a sudden, you can't really do building tours. You're going to have to be on social media, and you're going to have to communicate this through video, messaging, and it's going to have to be very quick hits on what this is all about. And translating the technical language of energy modeling and performance to simple lines that are still, of the quality that you would expect if you're someone who cares about building science was challenging, but it was definitely doable. So, we really had to go back to the basics. What does it mean to be high performance? We didn't think that using words like, oh, this is a passive house building meant anything to people, because they're like, what do I care? I know nothing about it. And I think we ultimately captured it with sort of, why would you live in a passive house? Because you can breathe better. I mean, you can sleep better, you can work better, and that just can make your life better. And those messages really started to speak to folks. I had a great sales team. My Buy Boston sales team of brokers really took it on themselves to learn passive house. They went from, sort of not being certain how they were going to respond to certain things to really asking me, does this make sense? And we always made sure that the texts and the brochures reflected things that were accurate. I even asked Passive House to review my website and language I had there, because I just get concerned when there's a lot of greenwashing and exaggeration of what really you're doing. What we're doing is very simple. A lot of it has to do with insulation too. So I'm not a fan of overcomplicating things. This is a bit of a teaser for our Instagram page. We did a lot of video and music on, where even the ERV kind of turned cool. I'll share that with you a bit later. So, and finally, we sold out in actually 3 months. So this was a real twist to all of the events leading up to all of that uncertainty. We started marketing heavily as the building delivered at the end of December, around Christmas. I couldn't believe, but we were getting tours. And by March, we were sold out. So that was really, I mean, I can't imagine what we would have done had it not been a pandemic. But this was truly a great story of just committing to something that made sense and pulling it off. Solar is in my kind of last point that I want to cover here, because solar was really important to me. My experience with all sustainable features, they're invisible to the eye. No one can see them. People can talk about them, but like at a party, you can't pull out the energy model and say, hey, look at how my building performs. People just, you can't engage with folks that way. But solar is one of those things, and wind, you can see it. And then it takes you to a place where like, oh, there's energy here. We need energy. And with solar, you can actually tell people almost all your energy is being generated on site. You live in a building that doesn't put any carbon in the air, essentially. And that was, to me, a very compelling story. And then there is the other piece, which is the financial piece, and we're always concerned about cost. And what got me very concerned is also when I looked at pricing a residential solar array versus pricing a commercial, the pricing was ridiculous. I mean, there's almost a multiple of 2. And I kind of knew that as a developer, I had to make a choice, because I'm not going to put in, you know, the duct work for HVAC and then tell people, go buy the mini split and you put it in, which to me felt a little bit like I was doing that. And I figured out that you might as well do it and figure out how I'm going to structurally make that happen. I asked the attorneys to look at a structure that would allow for me to pass through the solar generation credits, but give me a chance to benefit from the tax credits. We figured out a license agreement. No one was happy about the paperwork. When we were selling these units, the buyer's attorneys, all 6 of them reviewed them, and then all 6 lenders reviewed them. And ultimately, in the end, it comes down to, I'm trying to give you solar. Why don't you want it? But that shows you a little bit of the hoops you have to jump through to make something like this happen. Solar array has been installed, and we're just waiting to receive approval to power it up. And this is the project today as it stands, 6 units on Fisher Ave. And that's it for tonight. I'd love to answer any questions. I'm not sure how much time this took, but tried to really give you a very, very brief overview.
That
Zeina, we
was-
got lots of time. Thanks for it.
Yeah, that was really great, Zeina. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about the structure that you used to get the solar done. Like how did that work exactly?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So solar is tricky because it depends on the use of the building. If you develop rental housing or any type of investment rental property, you can, and if it's staying under your ownership, you can get the tax credit benefit and hold on to the ownership, and you can reap the benefits. In the case of a condominium, I'm selling the property as you know, many pieces, and I had to carve out ownership of the solar array so that the land entity would hold on to it for 5 years, so it would capture the tax benefits, which individual owners could not. I would have been willing to pass the tax benefits to them, but you can only, the entity that purchases the system can be the only entity that gets the tax benefit. So that was the structure that we had to figure out. And really, I mean, sometimes when you're small and nimble and you have to figure it out, that's the best solution. Because I mean, a lot of people told me, no, you can't do it. No one does it for condos. And again, that's just another thing that people say when they haven't seen something happen. And I would say also with solar, we've just hit a tipping point, and this may have been happening for a number of years where it makes sense. I mean, solar didn't make sense 20 years ago, but also there's like a bit of a personal memory. I grew up with solar hot water on the roof of our building because my dad was an engineer, and he was just, solar was very familiar to me. I'm like, come on, my dad did this in the 80s and we can't do it in 2020. Ultimately, I'd also say I budgeted some of the cost of the solar towards marketing. So I didn't put it under, because I had to pitch it to my investors, and I figured I'm going to tighten the marketing budget and try and give them as much of a real building value. I mean, that's how you create value. I also pitched that condo fees were significantly less. So your ongoing cost is less when your energy is being paid for. So you just have to get creative. When appraisers would come and look at the building, I made sure to sit and look at what categories they were putting up there. And I had to capture all that work into the actual overall valuation for everybody's sake. And those conversations, people often, again, this is why finance is so important in our business, because they have to be captured somewhere economically.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm gonna take the host's right and butt in a little bit. We do have some questions in the queue, but you mentioned appraisals, and I'm wondering if there's advice or specific strategies you could share with people in terms of how to get the appraisers to understand what they're valuing, because what we so often hear is like the MLS doesn't care, like nobody's looking at this, and like how do you make allies of those folks and actually bring them up to speed on the differences?
Yeah, I mean, I really, like, the first thing I do is I talk numbers. And like, why wouldn't you want to, offset your annual operating costs? And isn't it conducive to the lender to know that if someone is, is having financial challenges, they can still pay their utility bills? I think you really have to go to explaining to them of how much sense, why this makes a lot of sense. I'm licensed as a real estate salesperson, so I know how to appraise property. And I think that a gentleman here who's very active, Craig Foley, has added line items on MLS for more, so that you can introduce more of the features that Passive House has and talk more about that. I always tour appraisers myself. I mean, I'm there. I just show up, because if I pass it on to a junior manager, they won't have the audacity to tell the appraiser, hey, what do you think about this? Have you valued this? So I really do try and have those conversations. And it's kind of like what you all are doing here, is just making sure that we're not in silos, isolated. We got to be stepping out of our comfort zone and talking to the folks who have no idea what this is. And a lot of people will often say, oh yeah, I know what this is. And then I try to really avoid saying, no, it's Passive House, so it's that. I try and say, oh, look, here's the heat pump that we're using. Or have you seen the solar on top? We spent, $200,000 on it. And, I'd love to make sure that that is in the valuation. And there's an online calculator for it if you need it. I mean, that's how, I guess I'm pretty annoying to work with, because I'll talk about everything I'm doing and make sure that people hear about it. It's the only way.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Great stuff. So why don't we go to the audience for questions? Thanks, Prue, for getting the question queue, or question period started. We're gonna head over to Rick. And while Rick is coming on, I'll just say again, thanks for this little slideshow of the details and the work involved, and again, the beautiful project. So thanks for putting that together for us.
You bet.
I can't tell if I'm muted or unmuted. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Rick.
Yes, you're unmuted.
Okay. So I'm impressed with the energy savings and the embodied energy thinking that went into this with the insulation and lots of wood. So that's great. I'm trying to convince our local jurisdiction to provide rebates of some kind to builders who do responsible building like this. I'm wondering if there was any advantage in Boston, or if anybody knows of other places where they are providing some kind of motivation for builders to do that transformation, get away from the high embodied energy materials.
Yeah, and Rick, where are you based out of?
I'm in Muskoka, Ontario.
Oh, okay. I grew up in Montreal, Canada. So yeah, I have to say, when my experience is incentives maybe contribute marginally to any project success. I am trying to bring Passive House to market by making sure that I'm in a market that can afford to pay for it. So the incentives are nice, but what we faced here that was really frustrating to me is that there was a whole multifamily incentive that was put out And we were 6 units, and the incentive, I think, starts at 5. But we were so small that the utility company, Eversource, that was putting out the incentive, didn't want to really help pay for our consulting fees, for example, because we were so small. So we kind of got snobbed because they want to pay for the 350 unit. And it was interesting for me because I've come from that big world. So I fought for the building to get some of those, consulting fees. But I'd say in the end, it really didn't do much. And I'd say I found out about an IRS rebate for high performance buildings that requires a HERS rating. And because I went down the passive house approach here, I didn't get a HERS rating. That frustrated me a bit because that would have been a lot more money than a lot of the other incentives that were being advertised. So ultimately, solar is working in the US right now because of the tax benefit. And we need to find ways to create more tax benefits to this type of home ownership, because we are saving the utility companies the cost of building more, even renewable plants, by making these buildings standalone and self-sufficient. So that work, I think the activists are working on it, but that conversation of how you actually structurally put it in place, there's a lot more that needs to be done. And I think from what I've seen is the passive house activists in Boston have been very, very successful implementing incentives. And when I talked to a gentleman who was behind it, he said it took about 2 years and he couldn't believe that they got it done. So it really is collective work of folks just like you and people here on the call saying, and this makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to back it up. This really does make sense.
It does make sense. I mean, I look at that first page that came up here, passive house plus low embodied carbon, electrify, clean energy equals climate action. And it's that climate action that I'm thinking about, that we need to do more of this, not just passive house, but the low embodied carbon and electrifying. And convincing other builders to do that.
And I would say I really always avoid setting a bar that's so high that I can't meet it. And I don't worry too much about the path. I just try to set that intention and stick to it. So I didn't measure embodied carbon because as we were going through it, it was hard enough to get to passive house. And I think I also want to share with you, we failed. We didn't hit passive house. We hit passive house low E. So in many ways, we maybe were not as successful as we should, but I think that kind of there's a lot of like shaming on what but to me it was, of course, there was some thermal bridges that were nasty from that steel structure. And again, the team, despite their best intentions, could not figure out all the connections. And then we had a pandemic, so I couldn't stop construction and have new steel details manufactured. All of these decisions impact the viability of delivering the best product that you can in the time that you have with the circumstances you face. So luckily, I mean, this is where having renewable on site does help offset some of those challenges that don't get solved within a reasonable amount of time. Yeah.
Thanks, Rick. And again, I mean, we'll have more of these examples in the future, how we're trying to bring the bigger picture together. But again, these starters into the city are fantastic. So Zeina, thanks for commenting about that. We're going to head over to, and again, thanks for the slideshow. I just turned it off just because people want you to slow it down, and unfortunately we can't because you're asking questions. But again, they did enjoy seeing the process from scratch to finish. And again, it's a beautiful project. So thanks, Rick. We'll head over to Patrick Walmsley if Patrick is still with us.
I'm still here. I think my question on there earlier probably isn't relevant anymore, but I did want to ask, like, I noticed a lot of these buildings, a lot of the multifamilies that have been featured have relatively thin walls, like exterior walls. So I was just wondering, like, I know I assume like half the energy loss is the wall insulation. So was that like a cost trade-off, or was that were there other factors there?
So the question is on the wall construction and the amount of energy that we were able to maintain. So we had a double stud wall with a 12-inch cavity that was stuffed with insulation. And so I think we used 36 tons, which I did the calculation would be a football field with 6 inches of insulation spread. It was a lot of insulation. Yeah, we didn't cheap out on insulation. We went for it. It really is all about insulation.
Very cool. I'm down the street, so I'll have to drive by and check it out.
You bet.
Yeah, Patrick, we're looking for an update next week, so you do that. All
Will
right,
do.
Harvey, Mr. Think Passive House, you had a couple questions, so go ahead.
Yes, great presentation. I went to school in Montreal, so
Oh,
I
nice.
hope you're still a Hab fan. Now you're in Boston. So I have three. One is for Lloyd. What was your build out per square foot? Second question was selling price per square foot. So compared to with like products that are coming out, were you paid a premium on sale? And then finally, you did talk about appraisers, but how were the banks looking at it after the appraisers, after you boosted them up a bit on Passive House? And did that help at all with educating the appraisers and as well with the banks for your individual purchasers when they went to qualify for mortgages?
Yeah, a lot of good questions. So I'd say I'm gonna guess, because what my approach has been, when you start to price a project one way and then you price it another, it just, the pricing never makes sense. And sure, installation costs money and there's consulting fees, but ultimately the plan here was that we had to attract a customer that was going to come to a community that isn't known as a residential market. So I really looked at Passive House. I just thought that this was a great opportunity to showcase Passive House because it was going to pull my market. In terms of premiums, I would easily say it was 10 to 15% premium in construction, just from some of the things we talked about. And I'd say the premium in terms of the sales was about the same. When the market tanked as we were delivering, I was concerned. We did make concessions and compromises, but ultimately we sold fast, so I didn't have to carry the interest. So when I look at this, I have a hard time answering, because I look at everything. I look at, did we deliver this at a reasonable time? Did everybody make money? Is everyone okay? And so I'd say it worked out well for us. And I think it did work out because we decided to go down that Passive House route. In 20 years, when Passive House becomes the norm, maybe it won't. Maybe we'll have to do something else. But for now, obviously, this is not market standard. And it did help. Boston has very high construction costs. I did not hit any shortages. I had ordered the windows from Italy, actually, the high performance windows. And those did get delivered. I was really concerned about procurement and logistics during COVID. I mean, we dodged a very big bullet that could have really hit us hard. When you're in a market that is first-time home buyers, it's not like the luxury market. So you don't have that cushion as well. So we got it done. I'd say it was tight all around, but investors were happy. I mean, that's the other thing. This is market. I didn't have to build any affordable either. So I think that was one of the questions. And in terms of appraisers, appraisers appraised it really high when we were done. Going in, no one appraised it well. I mean, because they couldn't see it. The building has stunning views. The quality of the building itself turned out really great. And you can see some of the images. We staged every unit because we knew no one was going to show up to tours because it's COVID. So there's a lot of stuff that we did. You know, the marketing, I have to say the marketing was big. I did not expect myself to sort of really have to translate it into a marketable, you know, communicated through video and web the way we did.
Yeah, 15% isn't so bad when you think about it. So then the only other supplemental question would be, when I'm talking about 15% more building costs, but since built, has any of the units been sold on the secondary market, and has prices increased since?
Yeah, that would have really pissed me off. But I'll tell you what, this building actually has some belts and suspenders in place because we're trying to serve the community of home ownership. We have a restriction in there that's administered by the city of Boston. And again, I mean, this was a cumbersome deal because when you're trying to do the right thing, a lot of things kind of get complicated. But people can't, you know, they can sell, but they won't make money because the closing costs are the driver right now. If none of them had an issue with the lenders, appraisers, otherwise they would have come back to me and renegotiated. So clearly there's room there. And I would expect they will all make money. Mission Hill is in the Globe recently was cited one of the best places to live. This is not the case. Before, this was not the reputation it had. So again, if development to me is about, making a living, but serving and helping and figuring out how to lift up a community. We accomplished it, and I'm grateful for that. Can't ask for more.
Thank you so much for answering my questions. Great project, great presentation.
You bet.
Yeah, indeed. Excellent. Okay, so thanks, Harvey. And moving over to Justin.
It's kind of a follow-up to that. I was wondering, how did your profit margin compare to this project as opposed to any previous projects you had?
Yeah, so I came from the large scale commercial development, and I really over time grew very concerned about profit margins in those deals because of the time they take, the contention. When you don't have harmony in terms of objectives, you just get strung out. I think this was a solid small deal. Investors were happy, so it hit sort of a return where they would come back. I think the profit margin was good. It was especially that we're in a pandemic. You have to factor in that a lot of people have gotten hit very hard, especially with the construction shutdown. I think we had a project that was unique enough. We didn't have a lot of volume. I had this and another 3 units down the street, and they both sold. So we also have a market that is underserved in terms of housing. So I don't know if that answers it, but I'll do it again if that's what you're asking. I'm not like, and that was a concern I had, because if you believe in something and you do it and it fails, it just doesn't help anybody tell the story. But I certainly would do it again. And they're watching, the community is watching, because now they're telling me, well, we're going to ask developers to do more projects like yours. We were watching you, so I definitely was the guinea pig.
It's just good to, when you're talking to a developer who, trying to get them to look at passive house and, showing that, that can be, they can still make, we can still make a profit with everything that we're doing, and showing projects like yours, which are doing it. So that's yeah,
you bet. That's the plan, is to keep doing more of this. It makes sense.
Okay, another great question with Justin, and hit a home run over Fenway Park there with that answer. That's great. All right, Prue had a question about marketing, and then we'll wrap up the happy hour and dive in after hour. So Prue?
So actually, my question about marketing, I think, is a great way to start off the after hour, because I would love it, Zeina, if you could play some of your marketing videos for us from Instagram. That would be great.
Right. Let me pull up my...
Okay. Well, we'll come to that in a second. Then why don't we just answer a question from Bo Green, who's got his hand up, and then we'll do marketing and catch up to the rest of the people in the queue here. So that standpoint, let me do the next week. And don't worry, Jeff, I see your hand up and you're in the queue. So hold on. So I'm going to share my screen here again. And I want to go to this. And I'm going to do slideshow. Current. All right, so of course, there we go. Now everyone can see the screen. Want to give some thank you to all the sponsors. So happy to give thanks to 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxtingwe, Glavel, Minotaur, Mitsubishi Electric, HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwell, Stowe, and Zola. We also have our stakeholder partners, NYSERDA, and we have our patron sponsors, Air Barrier, BR&A Consulting Engineers, Brennan & Brennan, Innotech Windows and Doors, and US Engineered Wood Tista. So thank you for the sponsorship. Because of that, we can continue on to have what we're doing. Next week on the Accelerator, again, it's only a 2-day week. This week was a 3-day week. So hopefully you enjoyed the summit. And we're back next week with the Passive House Accelerator Construction Tech on Tuesdays with Kyle Mock from Mock Architecture, looking at this Passive House project you see in the slide here. Then on Wednesday, we will have another happy hour with Tim, Ian, and looking at the Lexington Parkway Passive House. So hopefully you can join us for those. And now we'll turn it back over to Prudence to wrap up the happy hour. Oh, sorry, you know what? I forgot one more slide. We had a summit this month, and we've got another one planned for May. It's a Resilience in Canada, presented by Passive Canada. So we have Louise on board, and Chris Ballard is also a fan who enjoys the Accelerator. So we've got an event on Thursday, May 20th. Put that in your calendar. And now I'll turn it back over to
Great. That Resilience in Canada looks like a fantastic event. It's great to see Passive Buildings Canada and Passive House Canada working together with the Accelerator. Woohoo! Well, thank you everyone so much for joining. And thank you so much, Zeina, for sharing your great business knowledge with us from the developer perspective. And for those of you that need to go eat dinner, work on a deadline, give the kids a bath, whatever it is, we're going to miss you, but we'll be back here again next week. So we hope that you come back. And for those of you who are going to stay on, let's roll into the after hour.